Hi, hello, and welcome to the Wonderscape, friends. My name is Faded Alien, and this is our time for our project and our materials. Let's go ahead and jump into our tutorial in 3, 2, and 1. Let's go! So to start this tutorial off, I'm using a base of a acrylic paint book, and I'm taping the border just using my painter's tape that you would use for painting your wall, and I'm making a little border so that our image, once it's completed, has a nice clean border for us to work with. And prepping our base, I like to use a 1-to-1 mix of our red and titanium white with a 3-inch square acrylic wall brush. As I added the base shade, I would go in with a little bit of titanium white at a time, and at the upper half of my page, I would start to make a gradient before making my light pink little moon, just adding a little bit of our titanium white at a time to our base shade of pink to make our cloud effect with our fan brush, and gently patting away as we go down our canvas here. And I'm going to go back in mixing a few grays and adding some shadows here and there, as well as tapping a little with more concentrated titanium white at the tops of the clouds and the moon to kind of give it the reflective glinting or glittering effect. Moving into our tree line, I find it easiest to work from the ground up, starting with my brightest shades and then going in with my square brush and then tapping it, starting at the top of the tree down, kind of making a triangular shape, and that's how you form a cedar. And then I do that with my 3 other shades, my brightest shade, my darkest shade, and my medium shade, and continue that process. I wanted to pause the video here and go over how I went into the hills, and I did the same process as the trees, but doing sweeps and making half circles going down and creating a trail with my highlight shade and stippling that through and kind of making a windy S curve. I wanted to include that because I like to have a little forest trail and just have that extra bit of detail. Anyway, back to it. Now that the forest is present, let's get started on our all-seeing mushrooms, starting with the stalks. So using that Sargent Art Tempera in the shade Almond Cream, I'm starting to build our stalks from the ground up, giving them some funny shaped ends and kind of giving them different bends and twists here and there. Also creating a highlight shade for our stems as well, and giving them our highlights using our moon to help kind of balance the light, and a darker shade at the base to give it a shadow. I wanted to give it a lavender kind of top and give these mushrooms a sort of bulbous shape. I'll include the inspo photo above, hopefully. Moving on from the rounded shapes, I want to then start to add our shades, so making a darker lavender and a lighter lavender by just adding the titanium white. We can go ahead and start to add our highlights as we do more and more opacity to our lavender. We can go in and start to shade our stalks, and I do a little bit of dilution with our tempera black and then spray that through with a fan brush and a lot of water and just thin it out to give it a streakier kind of vibe as we go through our mushroom stalks. The next thing I wanted to add was our bumpy texture, so kind of making a mix of all of our general purples and stippling that through starting at the tops. We can then start to make some darker freckles and stipple that in and give our mushrooms more of a toadstooly, bumpy kind of texture. At this point, I wasn't sure if I wanted to add eyes yet, but I knew I wanted to have mushrooms, so I saved room on the top of the mushroom, kind of unsure of if I wanted to have a fairy there or just some kind of centerpiece, but this time I decided we were going to paint our eyes. So I started to kind of round out and make our circular areas with a dark purple, making our eyelashes first and then filling in the tops with a off-white, not using pure white for the eyes yet. I still want to have some darkness to it because it's in shade, it's still moonlight outside, so I wanted to keep some darkness in there. Then I'm going to go ahead and start to create our inner cornea colors and start to flesh those out as well. After the mushroom eyeball bases are created, we're good to add our colors. I wanted to add a crystally blue to the cornea, so I added our base shade and then I kind of rounded that out with our deeper primary blue, and then I used straight tempera blue and made that the iris. Going in with our eye shines, I did a little bit of white, and I'm doing that for all of the eyeballs in one sweep as I go, just to make sure everybody gets the same amount of paint done and the same amount of detail. After finishing that out and doing a little bit of sparkles and starlight into our sky, I'm ready to start painting in our lashes, and I go in with a mix between our dark purple and our black again, just to kind of revitalize the eye and make it look more like a tissue eye attached to the mushroom versus a eye just kind of slapped on. I wanted to kind of blend it in and bleed it in a little more with our mushroom tissue. I will say our Wonderscape is starting to look quite wonderful, but not as Wonderscapey as I want it to yet. And at this point, I couldn't figure out what all I wanted to include in this painting, but I knew that there was just something more that I wanted to add. So I'm paying attention to the color schemes that we've already added. A lot of cool toned pastels in here to add a further incorporating kind of tie-in character for later. Keeping that in mind, I'm just kind of dotting my T's and checking my literal eyes and making sure all my detail is implemented in each eyeball. Going in with one more pass with my highlight shade of Artist Loft Titanium White and our almond cream color, and going in and giving our wispy little gills one last little check through, making sure those textures are also predominantly seen in our mushroom. I want to emphasize as much texture into these plants as I can. There I am doing my little zoom ins and pan ins to kind of show you all those ooey gooey details as we do this process. To blend the mushrooms to the forest floor, I'm actually using a mix of very dilute tempera black and our base pink shade and stippling that into the stems and kind of blending that through just to allow it to seamlessly blend into the forest floor more and not just kind of stand out. We're going to give it a little bit of shadow using the same diluted tempera black and going underneath our mushroom caps on the floor and giving it a more prominent shadow, highlighting the edges of our moon more to give it a slight texture, and adding our micro shadow highlight details. And not gonna lie, friends, at this point I thought I was done with this, so I wanted to catch you up on our prettier details so you can see it a little more up close. I apologize, I know my camera isn't the most detailed, so here's a paused photo of it. Continuing, I decided I wanted a fox for our main character, so going in with our base shade of almond cream tempera paint and making that our base and filling it in part by part, making sure to highlight any of the areas where the moonlight might capture the fur a little bit brighter. I wanted to make this guy nice and ice blue, so I used that almond cream to kind of add a softer base to it, making sure to fully coat the most of the fox with that super sky blue, leaving our leg solid for the time being. I want to make that leg nice and dark later. And I'm going in and adding finite little sweeps of color, building up our darker primary blue at the base of the tail, the tops of the back, and the hips, making that leg nice and navy blue, continuing to do that feathering detail as I go. Let's focus in on our fox's face here. Following the roundness and contours of a red fox, I added my highlights using almond cream and the sky blue, just in reverse to the natural red fox colors. Using that reference for the entire time doing the fox's face, not gonna lie, I paid attention to every shadow and contour to keep up with that feline roundness but the sharp canine muzzle. Filling in the eyes, I decided to go for a very pale yellow to kind of give a glow nocturnal effect to our fox's face. So I'm letting that dry, and then I filled in the pupil with a very dark blue, not quite a black, and filled in our nose with the navy blue, adding our highlights and our freckling. There is our up-close fox face, and our fox added to our Wonderscape. Next, let's add some pixies, filling in our sketches and making that solid black silhouette. I decided to use very, very thinned out metallic paint for our wings, mixing that in, thinning it out, and making a outline with our chrome. And then I used our folk art glitter dragon scale mix and filled in the wings with the base color peeking through to kind of give it a dragonfly-esque look. Now we get to do our peels. I've yet to find a tape brand that doesn't peel the paper. Not gonna lie, guys, I'm still on the journey to find a paint tape that peels a little bit smoother and doesn't rip my note paper as much as it does. So if you have any recommendations for me, let me know. But in the meantime, here's our not too satisfying peel. I am so sorry, friends. This one did end up chipping a little bit of the painting. As you can see, I'm kind of sad about that, but it's okay. It's okay. We will find a paint tape brand that works. You know what I mean. As we continue the peeling process, I wanted to get into what inspired me and why I made the Wonderscape. I wanted to make the Wonderscape because I noticed I kind of shy away from the pink palette, and I used to really enjoy painting in pinks, so I wanted to get back into it, and I wanted to do a landscape painting, so I figured I would combine both and kind of make a Alice in Wonderland-esque inspired forest and add my own little creatures with my own little twists. So that's kind of how we got to our Wonderscape, and then I kind of added different creatures and characters as we continued to build on our forest. I also drew heavy inspiration with making the fox with the newest creation of the direwolves, not direwolves, that happened recently if you keep up with the news. So I wanted to create some kind of new canine creature based on modern science and how we're able to literally create a new species. So I wanted to pay homage to that.
7, 1, 25. And then we're going to put our artist signature. I've been doing this this signature since middle school now. That being said, I am so dedicated to my little branding. I have it written and inked on my ankle. So that's that on that. Let me see if this is dry. Ooh. Are you dry?
Erase our stray sketch lines from our pencil very gently here. Anywhere that you might see any of your pencil line, just erase it, clean it up a little bit. Especially like for me, the shoe areas kind of got a little funky there. Cool! All right, y'all, let me show you this real quick. And that includes our Wonderscape art tutorial. Thank you so much for coming through to my Patreon and watching this. If you want to see what I'm up to, be sure to look out for future updates for tutorials. Remember to stay safe, stay positive, and stay creative. I will see you soon. Bye, friends.